Hello, and welcome to this training on the solar module for Fluke's TruTest software. My name is Will White. I am a solar application specialist here at Fluke. And in this training, I'm going to go through essentially every piece of the solar module for TruTest that's used with the SMFT 1000. That's our solar multifunction tool. The first thing to do is download the software. You can go to this website shown on the screen here, or you can just go into your preferred search engine, put in Fluke TruTest download, and the download website should come right up. When you first install TruTest, you're going to need your license key that either came with your SMFT 1000 or you can purchase it separately on the website. It'll ask you some general information to set up the program. It will ask you information about the company, location, names. It'll ask you to set up a username and password, and then you'll be ready to go. When you log into TruTest the next time, if there is a software update available, it will prompt you at the login screen. And it's sometimes somewhat hard to see. It's just this little notification at the bottom of the login box there. So be sure to keep an eye out for that and download the newest version and replace it when those versions are available. I will say when you go to update the software, it will ask you if you want to uninstall the existing version. That's fine. TruTest backs up all your data, so any data that you had in TruTest when you update the software will be backed up and there for you in the future. Let's take a look at the main screen. This is the first thing that you'll see when you log into TruTest. Here I have a list of clients on the left-hand side. I have 3 clients in here. You can add a new client by clicking the Add New Client button at the bottom left there. You have the different modules. These modules are for different tools that are sold by Fluke. The solar module, which we're going to talk about in this video, is specifically for the SMFT 1000. Again, that's our solar multifunction tool. Once you extend the solar module screen down, you can see how many clients you have. You can see the sites there. You can see some client info for the client that you have highlighted. I currently have this sample client highlighted. You can see the client number. That is very important when you add a client and a site into TruTest. It will have a client number and a site number, and you'll add those into the SMFT 1000 before you do your testing, which makes it very easy when you're downloading data to TruTest, which we'll see here in a little bit. You can edit your client info there. In this screen, you can also change the language. We've got a couple of different language options there. You can change your region. Currently, TruTest is set up for mainly use with our installation testers, which are primarily used in Europe. So most of the countries you see here are European countries. If you are outside of Europe, just select international. Once we are ready to go into the client, we highlight the client on the left-hand side there. We open the solar module by hitting that little caret in the left-hand side, and then we will open the client info by hitting that open button we see there on the right. Once we hit the open button in the main screen, we will go into the client sites screen. Here is where we can see all the different sites assigned to that client. We have the site list in the vertical list on both the left-hand side and at the center of the screen there. We can add a new site by clicking that new site button. We can edit client info here. This is the same that we saw in the main screen. You can edit the information here as well, whichever is more convenient for you. You can add remarks, which are simply notes about the client. And one thing you'll notice as we go through TruTest, remarks show up in several different places. So you can have it at the client level, at the site level. You can even get down to the inspection and individual test data. So lots of places to add notes in there in different situations. You can open the setup wizard there. This is the same setup you would go through when you first opened TruTest. So if you feel like you need to go in there and change something, you can also click the Don't Show Again, and that info button will go away. We have the help screens. The manual button will open a PDF of the TruTest manual. It has some additional information about all the modules in there, but the solar module as well. You can click About, and that will open up some information about TruTest. This gives you your software version, and this is the place where you can also manage your license. Now, if you need to move TruTest from one computer to another because you have one license that allows you one instance on one computer, and say you get a new computer or you wanted to move it from a laptop to a desktop in the office, click this Manage TruTest License button. Will bring you to this screen, and here you can deactivate the license on this computer. You still have access to the license. Make sure that you copy this license number down before you deactivate it so you still know what the actual number is. And then hitting deactivate will eliminate that license on this computer, and then you can move that activation key to a different computer. Back up to the settings menu. In here, you can change the language. It's the same that we saw on the main screen. You can restore the defaults to TruTest if you wanted to put the settings back to the way they came from the factory. And then you can view current settings. These current settings are not user adjustable. Those are set in TruTest, but this gives you information on where data is located in TruTest. So you can go in and see where your backup location is, where the measurement data is located. That's some useful information there. You can also see the current settings from the language, the country as well. On the account menu, you can view the user. This is the admin user where you can go in and change the admin password. You can log out of TruTest. You can close the client from this site, and you can exit the program from there as well. Now you can click on the site to view your inspections, which gives you the test information from the SMFT 1000. Let's take a look at the inspections which are in the client's pages. Once we select a client, select a site, we see this inspection page. The first thing we have is the site inspection information that's across the top there. We have a list of the different inspections. Here we just have one inspection. You may have more than one, depending on how many inspections that you have conducted. The site details are on the right-hand side. We can edit those details with the little pencil edit button as well. We can add remarks in there, site notes. We talked about that in the last section of this video. We can add a new inspection if we are conducting a new inspection. We've been out to the site and have new data. We can view inspections in here as well. When we click on the view inspections, we will go into the actual inspection, which is going to have the test data in it. Now on the left-hand side, we have our test information at the top. We have the array report at the bottom, where we will be able to view the data that we have collected during the inspections and testing. We can change the inspection status. That's a good way to know where the inspection's at, if it has been closed, either failed or passed, or if it's still open and there are things that need to be done to complete out that inspection. We can view unassigned data here. Now, if we click on unassigned data, we'll see any data that was downloaded from the SMFT 1000 that didn't get assigned to a client, site, and inspection. In this screen, the little caret on the left-hand side there, if we click on that, that will expand the information and we can view a couple things in here. First thing, measurements. We can look at the test data, whatever test was conducted, the information associated with that test. We have info on the test engineer, if that was assigned, and the serial number of the SMFT 1000 that took the test data. So if you have more than one unit, you can know who is assigned to that unit and figure out who the test engineer is if it wasn't in here already. You can add notes, same as we have seen already. And the most important thing in here is we can change the location of where the test will be assigned to. Within TruTest, we have this tree of information. It starts with a distribution board, that would be your AC panel, goes to the inverter, then to a combiner box, a string, and down to the module level. You can change the number of each of these locations to assign that data to a specific location within the client and site. Once you have reviewed this information, edited it to the way that you want it with the location. If you wanted to add any notes in there, you can click the Move Tests button, and that will move that test to the currently open inspection. Let's review how to get data off the SMFT 1000 into the TruTest software. We're in our inspection. In the inspection, there is the Get Data button. When you click on this, you'll see this drop-down menu. The first option is to download data from the solar SMFT. That's our SMFT 1000. Once you click on that, it will search for the SMFT 1000. The things to know are that you need to connect the SMFT 1000 to your computer using the USB to optical cable. You need to set the dial on the SMFT 1000 to the menu position. And also, you need to connect the IRR2 to the SMFT 1000 before you download the data. So what I usually do is go into the IV curve setting in the SMFT 1000, connect the IRR2 like you would before you're going to take a test, and make sure that they're connected before you download data. This will allow TruTest to download data off the IRR2 as well. Once those are done, it will connect and say, do you want to download measurements? You click the download button. If there is a new version of the firmware in the SMFT 1000, a pop-up box will come up and say, there's a new firmware version available. Do you want to download it? Just be aware that if you decide to do that update, it takes about 20 minutes to download and update the firmware in the SMFT 1000. So ensure that you have enough time to be able to do that. You won't have access to TruTest or the SMFT 1000 during those 20 minutes. Now you click download. It will download all the data that's on the SMFT 1000. We can see there's 4 different sets of data on here. If you click the caret on the left-hand side of the data, it will expand the information. It's got the same details that we saw in the unassigned data section. We can see our individual tests. One thing to know, if there is a red flag in this screen, that means the data has already been downloaded to the TruTest software. I've downloaded this data already, so the red flag's there. If it wasn't a red flag, there would be a checkbox where you could select what data you want to download. You can click the caret to expand the test data, and that's the same information we saw in the unassigned data section that we already reviewed. Measurements, info, notes, location. The location is really important. That's where you can change where that data is going to be assigned to. Another thing you can do in here is change the client or the site number. Say the test technician put in the wrong client or the site and you need to reassign that. You can click on that button. It opens up this dialog box. You can select an existing client. You can search your clients. You can add a new client as well. Once you pick that client, a second dialog box will come up and ask what site you want to assign it to, and then it will ask you what inspection you want to assign it to, whether that's an existing inspection or if you want to create a new inspection for that data. Now, if we go back to the Get Data tab, we can also download data from a file. When we click that, it opens up this folder. This is the default location for where test measurement data is downloaded to from the SMFT 1000. So every time you download data from the tool, it creates one of these files. This is really important to know that if you should download some information, you're adjusting it, and for some reason something happened and you deleted that information and you didn't have it saved on the SMFT 1000, this is where that data lives, and it will just keep updating every time you download a piece of information. This is also a easy way to share individual test data from different sites with different versions of TruTest. So if you have multiple instances of TruTest on several different computers, this is a way that you can share that test data between different computers. You just need to know what day you downloaded that data. You may have to go into the program data folder by typing in the address into the address bar if you're manually going into that folder to get these files. So just be aware of that. If you don't have administration access, that program data folder may be hidden. Select your file, click open, and that will download the file to TruTest. Another thing that we can do is we can sync with the SMFT. That is going to allow us to add or remove module data from the SMFT 1000. So we've got our module database here. If you have the advanced license of TruTest, you'll have access to the full database. You also need the advanced TruTest license in order to use TruTest to move module information from TruTest into the SMFT 1000. We're going to go over this screen in more details when we get to the administration section. Just know that you can access this module data through the site inspection by going to Get Data, Sync with SMFT, or through the administration section, which we'll talk about in another video. Once you've downloaded data from the SMFT 1000 into TruTest, you can view the test information in the site inspection screen. The first thing we're going to see at the top left is the certificate information. The TruTest software and the SMFT 1000 are based on the IEC 62446-1 testing of photovoltaic systems standard. This is a requirement in Europe. It's not usually a requirement in the United States, but it's a really good guideline to work off of. In here, you can see the type of tests that were done. You can look at the basic information about the client, the site, the contractor. You can see some installation details. You can get information about the utility. You can also use the pencil icon at the top right to edit any of this information. The next thing here is the test results summary. This is an overview of the tests that are in this inspection. We can see how many passed, how many failed. We can see when the test was done. We can see when the next test is going to be due. We can also see some information about the test instrument and the technician who did the test. Again, you can use the pencil edit button to change all the data in here, including the test engineer. You can see that there is a signature on this certificate as well. In a little bit, we'll see where you can add that signature file into TruTest so it shows up on these reports. The next thing down is a visual inspection checklist. This is found on the SMFT 1000. It's a list of requirements in that IEC standard. You can go in there, you can print a blank version of the checklist if you want a hard copy to go out into the field to manually fill it out as opposed to doing it digitally in the SMFT 1000. You can delete checklists from here, and you can see whether something passed, failed, or didn't apply to that installation. Now you can set this information in the SMFT 1000. You can also do it in TruTest itself. So you don't need the SMFT 1000 to set the visual inspection checklist pass, fail, or not applicable. You can add comments in here to each line if you wanted to give more detail, and you can even add photos to illustrate that something either passed or failed. Great place to add more documentation so you can see exactly what was wrong. The next one down is the functional test. This is exactly the same as the visual inspection checklist. This can be found in the function power setting in the SMFT 1000. As with the visual inspection checklist, you can print out a blank hard copy, you can delete the checklist, and you can add pass, fail, or not applicable in TruTest itself. Now, there's only 3 lines in these functional tests, so pretty straightforward. You can add comments and attach photos just like we did with the visual inspection. Now, getting into the array report, this is where the bulk of the test data lives. The tree on the left-hand side is how TruTest organizes information from the SMFT 1000. We can add distribution boards or inverters. we can delete things, we can duplicate whatever the selected item is, and we can copy the tree structure. This allows us, if we have a large system that is very repetitive, so maybe it has one distribution board with several different inverters with multiple combiners and multiple strings, and they're all the same, allows us to easily copy things in TruTest. Now, one thing you should know, you do not need to manually set up this tree in TruTest. As you're taking test data in the SMFT 1000 and putting the location to that test data, when you download that data into TruTest, it will automatically build this tree. So you don't necessarily need to do it manually before you do the testing. You can add information on the distribution board here. You can see the test results, although distribution board tests are not used in this module. They'd be used with other Fluke hardware that uses the TruTest software. We can add notes in here about the distribution board. Now as we change different levels, we'll see different test information. And at each level, you will be able to see a lot of the information in the tests at levels below it on the tree. So here we're at the inverter level. We can see the test results there. We have a power test for this inverter. So with the SMFT, we tested power on the DC side. We tested power at the AC side. Here we got a 70.5% efficient inverter. I will mention that this is an off-grid inverter at my house, which typically have lower efficiencies than a standard grid-connected inverter would. So that's not necessarily an unusual result. Now, in this little results box, if I click anywhere in that box, this screen will open. Now I can click the edit button here and edit any of this data. I can change whatever information is in here. One thing to note here, this is a good place to illustrate it. I have inverter efficiency limit at 90%. So as a result, this test failed because I'm at 70.5%. This is where you can change that 90% limit. So if I drop this to 70%, this test will then become a passing test. Pass or fail just relates to the limit that you manually set in TruTest. So you can change that results. You can use this drop-down results here to change a fail to a pass manually as well. Another thing to note in this screen is this Move Test Data button right here. If you find that the test data was incorrectly assigned to a specific location, if you hit this Move Test button, it will say, do you want to move this measurement to the unassigned list? If you click yes, it'll add it to unassigned. You can go into unassigned. You can find that piece of data. You can expand the information for that data. You can go to location and you can change where that data is located and then reassign it to that inspection. So this is a really convenient way to reassign that data if you need to. Within the array report, you can also view the IV curve information. So first we need to select a level that we want to see the information. We can look at it at the inverter, the combiner box, the string, or even at the module level if you're doing module level IV curve tracing. Click IV curve information. You can see the desired IV curves on the right-hand side. As you check those different curves, they'll overlay on the graph. The STC curve is the measured data corrected to standard test conditions of 1,000 watts per meter square, 25 degrees C cell temperature. As you're taking measurements in the field, those measurements are not going to be at standard test conditions in almost every case. So the SMFT 1000 and TruTest will correct that to standard test conditions so you can compare different IV curves. At the bottom, you have the table. If you click the little caret on the right-hand side, it will expand that data. You can see the STC data, which is the measured data corrected to standard test conditions. You can see the actual measured data as it was collected. And the nominal data is the data from the module manufacturer. This is what the manufacturer tested when they were testing in the factory at standard test conditions. And that's how the modules are rated. We can also add the measured IV curve on there, and if we click the STC button again, it will remove the STC curve, so you'll see just the measured curve. We can see the power curve that adds the power to the y-axis on the right-hand side. We can see the measured power curve as well, and again, if you click the power curve at STC button, it will remove that curve from the chart. Adding nominal will add this green area we see on the graph. This is the manufacturer's nominal data, the curve from the manufacturer, plus or minus whatever the pass criteria you have set in TruTest. Now, I have it set at plus minus 5%. You can see that in the bottom on the table there. So that's what we see on this green curve area. That's the manufacturer's data plus or minus 5%. We can do the same thing for the power curve as well. Again, gives us the power curve plus or minus 5%. We can also see the maximum power point of the curve that we have selected. That's the knee of the curve. If you went from that point to the left and that point down, that area under the box is the maximum amount that it could be at any point on that curve. If you click the pointer button there, you can get data at any point in the curve. So at this point in the curve, I'm at 54.7 volts, 5.46 amps, and 298.662 watts. And we can do that for any point on the curve. The magnifier allows us to select an area of the curve so we can zoom in and look at it in more detail. If we have zoomed in, zoomed out, or use that magnifier, we can use this reset button to go back to the default view. And then we've got zoom in and zoom out as well. If we click the information button on any of these pieces of information, it will open up more details about that test that was conducted. We can click the pencil button there and we can edit that data as well. We can export the IV curve into a report. Here we see the IV curve that we've selected. The table below, and it's cut off here so we don't see the whole thing, is a measurement of every data point the SMFT 1000 collected. So that could be up to 128 different data points. We can export this report in a bunch of different file formats. We've got Excel, Word, PDF, PowerPoints, CSV files, really any type that you could want to export. Now, when you select different test measurements, it will overlay them on the graph. This is a really great way to identify any outliers, especially if you're doing it for the STC graph. If you use the measured data and do this, they'll be all over the place because they're not at the same irradiance and temperature level. So we need to use the STC curves in order to be able to do this accurately. We can also compare the data in the table below. You can use the caret at the top right to expand all of the data if you want to do that. We can see this data at different levels as well. We've been looking at the inverter level. If you had a large inverter with multiple combiner boxes, you would be able to see all the IV curve data from all the strings from all the combiner boxes in one shot. You could also go down to the combiner box level where you can view the individual strings from that combiner box, and then you can go down to the string level and even the module level as well. All the options at any level of this tree are exactly the same. So they'll be the same as what we just reviewed. So this is a great way to look at your IV curve data, compare it, find outliers, identify issues that may need to be investigated further. In the inspection, you also have the ability to create reports. To create a report, click on the Open Report button in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. You can open the detailed report, which includes the inspection data, or you can open a blank report that you could take out to the field and fill out by hand. Of course, this kind of defeats the convenience purpose of using the SMFT 1000, but it is an option available to you. When you open the report, this is what you'll see. And the first thing you'll notice is the buttons at the top. Some of these buttons are not used in solar reports. They're used in other report types. You can refresh report data using the little refresh button. The number of pages included in the report are going to vary depending on what type of tests and how many were taken. If you only have IV curve tests, it will probably be a shorter report, although including the IV curve graph can increase the number of pages in the report. You can go to the first and the last page and previous and next page using the different arrow buttons. There's a page setup options, which allows you to set all the print settings. You can change from portrait to landscape. You can adjust the paper size. You can connect to a printer source, and you can adjust the margins of the report as well. There's also an interactive view, and that's kind of a bit of a misnomer. It's just the way the pages are organized. In the last view we saw where we had 28 pages, there's just every page is its own. In this view, the tests are grouped together. So it's not by page number, it's by test type. So all the IV curve tests are put together, all the functional tests are put together, the visual inspection checklist is its own. So it's a way of quickly navigating through the report without having to go through each individual page. You can open the print dialog box. The options in that screen are going to vary based on what print options you have connected to your computer, but that's where you can go to print hard copy or print to a PDF if you want to use an external PDF printer. You can export the data with the Save button, and it will open up this drop-down list. And much like we saw in the IV curve report, you can export in all types of different file formats from Excel, Word, PowerPoint, PDF, and other file types. You can search the report as well. You can zoom in and zoom out, and that will let you see the different information in the report. A lot of people that are using TruTest are using the reports to export into a specific file format and then pulling data out of the report, like the IV curve data, to include in their own customized report to their client. So that's an option as well, since you have all those file types that you can export to. Let's review the administration tab and all the options contained within. At the top of the screen, you'll notice the administration tab next to the inspection tab. That administration tab is available in any of the client view screens. Once you click on administration, you can see the options along the top. The first one we have is engineers. These are the people out in the field actually doing the testing. You can add different engineers. You can see the list of engineers. You can add the information for the specific engineer in here. You can determine whether they're active or inactive. You can delete the engineers, and you can add the signature file to add to the report. So if you want a report to come out with a signature attached to it, this is where you add that file for the signature to put in reports. The next thing we see is the test instruments. This is the SMFT 1000s that have been added into TruTest. Now, you don't necessarily need to add the instrument in here, but it will be helpful. You can do things like add new SMFT 1000s in here. You can put information about the tool in there. You can delete the tool. One really important thing to add in here is the last calibration date. The SMFT 1000s come calibrated from the factory. It's recommended that they be recalibrated on an annual basis. You can also put notes in here about who this SMFT is assigned to, so you can know who the technician is that's using this SMFT 1000. This is another location where you can do a firmware update. As I mentioned in a previous section of the video, when you download data from the SMFT 1000, it will automatically check to see if there is a new version of the firmware available. You can also manually check for updated firmware. Click the firmware update button. This screen will pop up. Remember, you need to connect the SMFT 1000 to your computer using that optical to USB cable. You set the rotary switch on the SMFT 1000 to the menu section, and then click next. It will say, look for the firmware. If there is firmware available, you can do an update here. Just a reminder, it does take about 20 minutes to update the firmware, so make sure that you have the time available. You will not be able to use TruTest or the SMFT 1000 while it is doing the software update. The next section is the company info. Here you can add information about your company, name, address. Most importantly, you can add a company logo. If you have an advanced license to the TruTest software, you can add a company logo. This will be attached to any reports that you export from TruTest. Now we have the certificate settings. There's no user adjustable fields in here at this point, so nothing to go into and adjust in there. We can back up TruTest here as well. We can select the backup location when we do this. When we exit TruTest, every time you exit the program, it will ask you if you want to back up. If you say yes, which is a good idea, it's going to automatically save that backup into this folder, C Program Data TruTest Backup. That's different than manually creating a backup, which we see in the administration tab. When we manually create a backup, we can determine where we want to save that backup to. I saved mine to my downloads folder. That's where I put temporary files. You can save it to any folder you want, but when you exit TruTest, it's automatically going to put this in the TruTest backup folder. So if you need a backup, you can always go back to that folder and pull the backup file from there. Restore is a way to pull information in using that backup file. Now, we talked about in an earlier section of the video, the backed up test information. When we download test information from the SMFT 1000, it creates a backup file specifically of that test data. This backup is a backup of all the data in TruTest. So in this instance of TruTest, I have 3 different clients. Each client has a site. There may be multiple sites for each client. There could be multiple inspections for each site. All that data is backed up when you do a backup or a restore using these settings here. You can select the file to backup either from the TruTest folder or from a different folder that you designated when you did a manual backup there. You can click on account info. This is going to give you information for the administrator who controls the license to TruTest. This is where you can go in and change your password. This is only the administrator under this account info. Under users, you can see people who are permitted to use TruTest. Now, again, TruTest is not a cloud-based software, so you can only use the TruTest version that is on a specific computer. We have a lot of clients who will have TruTest on a desktop computer in the shop where different users can go in and access that software. In users, you can see who is in TruTest already. You can add new users, you can delete users, and you can change a password. Users can only access that version of TruTest on that specific computer. You can also change their access level. When you do the drop-down, you can choose what level of access they have. The access level information is contained in the manual, which you can get to with the question mark in the upper right-hand side. But here's an overview. Users report can only create reports. They can print reports, they can print user information, that's it. The user download can do all the report stuff, plus they can transfer data between the SMFT 1000 and TruTest. Users who have modify can do the stuff that the report and the download level can do. They can also create new items in TruTest. They can change the tree structures. They can manage engineers. They can manage test instruments, change client and company information. Basically, this user modify level can do pretty much everything in TruTest. Auto test code is not used in the solar module. That's used in other modules in TruTest for our installation instruments, but it's not used for our solar instruments. And then you have admin. That's the person who controls the passwords. They control the license to that version of TruTest that you're using. The next thing in administration is the PV module database. We saw this a little bit in the actual inspection, but you can also access it through the administration tab. When you click on that, this is what comes up. You can see the number of modules in the database. This is a third-party database that's always being updated. You have to have an advanced license to be able to transfer module data from TruTest into the SMFT 1000, which is very handy way to do it because you don't have to then manually enter that module data. You can see all the module data in the table there. You can connect with the SMFT 1000 to upload or delete module data from the SMFT 1000, connect it to the computer with that optical to USB cable. If you have a new firmware version, it will prompt you. Again, it takes 20 minutes to update if you're going to do that. You can download data from the SMFT 1000. If this is your first time doing this, there's not going to be any module data there. I have module data on my SMFT 1000, so you can see I've got probably about a dozen different modules loaded into it already. From here, you can search the database. You're going to want to search with the manufacturer name and the exact model number. Once you get in there, be sure to verify that the information of the module you have matches that exact model data as well. Sometimes there can be discrepancies even with the same model number. Once you find the one you want, select that module, and then you're going to use this caret to the right here, this button in the middle, to move that module data from the module database onto the SMFT 1000. The list on the right is the modules that are already in the SMFT 1000, and you can delete modules that are saved on there if you need to. You can store about 21 modules in the SMFT 1000 at any one time, so you can get a good number of modules on there. Once you've selected the modules you want to put onto the tool, you hit the Send to the SMFT button, and then it's going to export all that data into the SMFT 1000. If you deleted things, we'll also remove them from the tool as well. If you find that you have a module that is not in the database, you can add a new module. So when you go in, click on the new module, you have to add all of this data. This data comes from the module specifications sheet. That could be the spec sheet or the data on the actual back of the module. You're going to get most of the things in here from that spec sheet. The one thing that you won't find on a spec sheet is fill factor. And you can see the formula here. It's maximum power voltage times maximum power current divided by open circuit voltage times short circuit current. It's going to give you a decimal that is less than 1, and you need to convert the decimal to a percentage before you add it into TruTest. So in this example, the result was 0.74. I just move the decimal place over 2 places and get 74%. It's going to be a number less than 100, and it's usually between 70 to 80%, depending on how efficient the module is. Once you've added all of that data, you can save that module to the database. Once you've saved it to the database, it will be in there in perpetuity. You can always go back and access that module in the future. You can also click Inverter Database. We do not subscribe to a third-party inverter database. So any inverters that you want to add to your reporting, you'll need to manually enter into TruTest. Very similar to the module list, I've already added this Outback Power inverter. That's the inverter that I have at my house where I've done a lot of this testing. You can edit the inverter specifications, you can delete the inverter, and you can add a new one. Very similar to modules, you go in, get the data from the inverter specification sheet, add it in here. Once you save it to the database, it will be included in that database in the future, so you don't have to add that again. You can just go select it when you need to. That's all the things in the administrative tab within TruTest. Let's go through a couple quick troubleshooting techniques you can use if you're having problems with TruTest. First one, you forget your password. First thing you do is close TruTest. Then you go to C, Program Data, TruTest, Admin. In most cases, you're probably going to have to actually type this in the search bar so you can see the bar highlighted at the top of this window here. Just go in there to your computer C, type in program data. That's going to bring you to the TruTest file, a folder, and then administration. A lot of times you can't see that program data folder unless you have high-level administration rights to your computer. Once you get into that folder, the only thing in there is the data.dat file. Delete that file and then restart TruTest. It's going to ask you to log in again with a new password. You don't actually need to use a password in TruTest, so you can just put in your username and just hit login and it will log you in. That way, if you forget, there's nothing to forget because you don't have a password on there. Downside is there's no security to it, so it's probably a good idea to use some type of password. Sometimes we run into sync issues with TruTest and the SMFT1000. In most cases, when that's a problem, either the TruTest software needs to be updated or the firmware on the SMFT1000 needs to be updated. Sometimes it's both. So if you're having a problem syncing data between the hardware and the software, look for updates and see if those have the most recent versions. If you downloaded some data and you don't know where it went, chances are it went in the unassigned data section. So go into that, look and see if there's data that's in there, then you can transfer that into your inspections. The other thing that can often be a problem when you're downloading data from the SMFT1000, if you did not sync the IRR2 to the SMFT1000 before you downloaded the data, that can occasionally cause problems, especially with the irradiance and temperature data. An interesting thing about the SMFT1000 with the IRR2, once you connect the two, the IRR2 will start data logging. And when you connect the IRR2 to the SMFT1000, it will ask you if you want to synchronize the clocks by hitting the up button. Always do that. Synchronizing the clocks allows the SMFT1000, if it loses connection to the IRR2, once you regain connection, it will synchronize that data. So it will import the irradiance and temperature data from the IRR2 into the SMFT1000, and it will correlate the data together to get the proper irradiance and temperature data in matched with your test results. So be sure to turn that IRR2 on, synchronize it with the SMFT1000. I usually go into the IV curve, test on the rotary dial, connect the two, and then go back to the menu setting and download the data. If you have any questions, feel free to call our technical support line. They're all experienced and can help you out. Hope you enjoyed this training and good luck with your testing and reporting.